law.
I know, but
There's another way to go about it, and that is to remind principals at their meetings and call out a board meeting.
not to make the law, make the choice.
We've got 35 schools that voted to include people. So you don't have to make a law, you just have to remind principals that this might be a good idea.
I think one of the things that we talked to principals this morning that one of the principals councils are reminding, and they're very aware of how they receive buses in the morning affects how they lead the first 2 hours of their day. And so in order to show that appreciation to the drivers and start to develop that reciprocating respect of you help us to get off to a smooth start in our day, we will do, here's how we will support you. And it becomes part of the dynamics of the school that everyone starts to see how everyone plays a very important part in the overall success of the school. And once you start having those types of conversations, you start to see those types of numbers in those types of schools recognizing that.
Okay, so we've been through the key areas. This was the result, what we talked about now is the result of all of the meetings that we had through our focus groups, but also, very importantly, I think, the meetings that we've had the last week and a half, because then we went through each of these, and there were lots of suggestions made that many of them have been incorporated in here, and the other ones we're still looking at. So this is a tentative kind of, as Kathy said, the bones, but it really does take into account large numbers of feedback, specifically on ideas that came from the focus group. So,
okay, sounds good. Cindy and April, you want to make your brief comments, and then I'm going to start down here and just come down the table?
No, wait, that's fine. I just thought you were taking names for people to speak. I didn't have brief comments. I kept all my notes as we were speaking.
So did I, so.
I followed instructions.
You're good. I appreciate that.
All right, I'll wait till it's my turn.
Okay.
I thought you were
Cindy, how
taking
about you? You good with that? Okay, here's the deal, guys. We've got about another hour of this workshop. If you break that down for us to have wrap-up time, that's like 6 or 7 minutes apiece to say your first comments on this first blush of this. It's obvious we're going to have other workshops because staff, is going to come back to us. Yeah, we're all figuring it out. So if you all are agreeable to that, then we kind of get the meat of what we are concerned about or things. Okay. I'm going to put you on first because we can't hear you real well.
And you want to get rid of me, so I spread my chairs. I know you do that, and I don't blame you. Chris, you did the one on communications, and I want to stop with that. When you talked about trying to resolve the radio issues, and the fact that you have gone out and done practice with your son to indicate how well they're running, what's the influence of the environment on radio issues? Is there any environmental issues doing stormy weather, during difficult times? I know distance and that kind of thing, certain points. But does the environment play any part in terms of the capacity for the radios to work effectively at all?
That's actually a great question. Almost like you led me into it.
Okay.
During our radio check, that's actually the question we ask. That's instead of just bothering them, can you hear me? That's actually the question we ask. Can you please describe the weather? So that when we capture that for each radio transmission that we have, sunny and clear, cloudy, rainy, whatever it is, I don't have the specifics on what that data looks like, but I'll make sure that you guys get it. That'll be a big part of what we do, especially with a third-party consultant.
Okay, because my question was, are we doing the checks on different environmental conditions in this facility?
Yes, ma'am, daily basis.
Okay. When we talk about employees going in and doing these checks, how do we log in that driver X is brought in and have these things? So is there a way to log in when they come in to indicate that all these things have been done, like the radio checks? Is there a way to do that?
Yes, ma'am, great question. They bring in a sheet telling us what their concerns are. Hey, the back bumper's tight, or whatever their issues are with it, the radio's not working. But then every bus that comes in for the DOE check, there's a work order done on that, which means we check off every single thing that was done on that bus, and those records are maintained for the entirety of the life of the bus. So yes, ma'am, there's a way that we track it on every single bus, everything that was done.
so one of the suggestions that came up was that we make sure that every bus drivers, when they pick up the bus after the check, they know exactly what was done on their bus.
Yeah, but I think that's important because I hope that will lessen that that conflict between, yes, this has been done, and no, this hasn't been done, or that it's not just my word, but there is evidence that something, and we can go back and pick it up and refer to it whenever it's necessary. Because, I think one of the things that I'm often confused about is people saying yes and no about a situation, and we have no way to verify in some cases. So I think we need to document.
There was no question that in the conversations that we had, there were people sitting in the audience, and some would say, this is happening, and others would say, that has never happened to me. So I think that the whole concept of documentation of who did training, okay, so that we know everyone was trained or who wasn't trained. So when someone says, I never got it, we can say, yes, you did, here it is. Or the bus, as you pointed out, Ms. Edgecombe, there were a number of different things. So that was a key component of what the bus drivers were saying under management. They want to know exactly what has happened so that there's a record of it.
And there is a record, but they just haven't been getting the copy of the record. So,
Or it's sporadic,
Right.
and they might get it, but not everybody gets it. So we've got to put that in practice, that everyone gets it, and then they know and we know.
Okay, I'm good.
I'm not pushing.
Okay. Training, I am pleased that we are going to have on the professional development. I think that's a really great move. A couple of questions. Do we do any kind of evaluation feedback after the training so we understand how well the training has been perceived, understood, and received by for our bus drivers or whomever's being trained? Do we have evaluations for that?
we've had some, and what's going to happen now under staff development, and we've had discussion with staff development, that's an integral part of the normal processes of that department. And so, of course, that will now be a standard feature that we'll be able to review on an ongoing basis to evaluate the training.
And my question was going to be when we something else about maybe 6 months later, if after the driver has been there, to go back and do a kind of a different kind of evaluation thing, but say, did that training actually help me in this job 6 months
Yes.
later down the line? But you also talked about a checkoff between the mentor and the
Yes.
driver. So maybe those two things can be part of the same process. If that driver is ready to say this the mentor says my driver's ready to move on, they can be there. But also getting some feedback from the actual new drivers. That trainer, that the trainer was helping me, but I need it should be broadened. But some feedback. So 6 months later, you've done the training, but you have the reality now of the job. So whether this training really matches what you need to be an effective driver, I think it's important.
And another feature about the mentor and the driver, the new driver telling us, having my mentor really helped me, right? So feedback on how well the mentors were doing with new drivers. Is some of the people in the audience were new drivers, and they were giving us feedback on that.
That should increase the numbers that are still around 6 months later, just like it does on the teaching side.
Yeah.
Well, it helps us develop, if there's something in the curriculum that we should add, just like you said, they'll be able to give us that information too. I wish we covered that.
Okay, last one. That I have specific questions, but I've already indicated to you my interest in looking carefully at those incentives. I think that you wrote that down, to expand the salary incentives, because I think the struggle is going to be for us. How do we do all of these things with limited funds? And sometimes it's not money that will make a difference in the morale, in people being valued, and in the culture, that there's other kinds of things. So I hope we will give a lot of attention to looking at other ways to make people feel that they're in a part of the team and that their work is really valued.
Great, thank you. So clear and concise, and we could hear you. I know you don't feel well, I'm so sorry. You don't. Dr. White, I'm going to go to you next since Mrs. Valdez is in the back.
Okay. Well, thank you for bringing a comprehensive plan to the board today. Board members, I would ask your constituents if they've entered the new car market from 2008 to present. Many have started to tiptoe into the new car market, and that's exactly what we're looking to do as a school board. Madam Superintendent and staff, I don't fault you. for not buying new buses in the wake of the economic downturn of 2008. In fact, I applaud you for your fiscal constraint. But we're clearly in a position now, both fiscally and out of necessity, where we have to buy some new buses. Staff, I trust that you won't ask this board for a tax hike. I trust that you won't ask this board to borrow money. So let's tighten our belts. Let's make this transportation improvement plan a priority in this year's budget. And let's move forward with replacing our aging fleet. And I'm glad to hear that you're not going to forget about our people. Our transportation staff needs to be supported, and in an effort to establish continuing improvement, we need to seek constant feedback from our employees, from those that matter most, those in the trenches. Once again, I want to thank you for this comprehensive plan, and I'm anxious to move forward in partnership with our transportation staff. Thank you.
Thanks, Dr. White. Ms. Stewart?
Thank you. I am excited to see what is in front of us and that you are looking at so many areas. I have a couple of questions. On communication, we talked about what's in place and enhancing what's in place, but we really didn't talk about any other options. I know that at some level, I know we're doing radio checks, but the overwhelming majority of the drivers were telling us that they had issues with their radios, and they were using their own cell phones to make ends meet, to contact other drivers to cover runs, to call their field supervisors, and I want to make sure that we're looking at another option for if my radio isn't working, I have another option. It's clear to me since 2 years ago and the tragedy that happened that the radio has been an issue. Whether it's training, whether it's the radio not working. I know I discussed with you a individual handheld cell phone distributed to drivers where they can call a field supervisor, 911, someone that they can call. So I want to make sure that that's still on the table. I appreciate looking at the radios and the towers and all of that, but I think there needs to be another option on the table. Obviously, that's a huge issue for drivers, and consistently in our meetings that were held, we heard of drivers. I commend them for doing it. I appreciate the work they're doing, but they're making ends meet on their own. By making phone calls from their personal cell phones. So I want to make sure that that is something that we are still exploring.
Well, all options are on the table. That's one of the reasons that we've got to get to this is we heard that, and what we heard and what we saw from all of the focus groups was it's a huge issue, which is why we're going out to actually assess it and find out, okay, what kind of an issue is it? So when we're at this point, we've done 3 areas and we're at 95%. I think we've got to look at, okay, what really are the issues? What do we have to do here? You know, I think we all know cell phones are not the be-all and end-all of everything because, number one, if they hadn't plugged it in, it's not going to work. If they're charging it, if they're in places where it goes out, it goes out. And so we've got a system that we've invested in. We've got to make sure that system, for one thing, is working well. And from our history of finding what's going on, we know we've got it working, but there's 5% where it's not working. That's not acceptable. We've got to figure that out. But any other options that we look at, we first have to make sure the system that we have in place is working as well as it can. And verify. You know, I think the frustration could be for drivers, this happened, and they said, some of them said, you know, I need training on how to use the system well. And so that's part of what we're going to be doing when we say, okay, this is how you're going to train, and everybody's going to have it in their hand and train on it.
And so touching on training, I know that typically, and I don't know if this is a negotiated item or not, when we have training for drivers, it's a large amount of people in one area. And maybe we need to look at doing smaller groups in their own area so that it's less people, there's not as many distractions. I know last year one of the trainings
communication issues in the actual auditorium that we were in. People couldn't hear. I mean, I remember calling the next morning and saying, let's make sure that that doesn't happen at the next training. So maybe we can look at dispersing the training and not making it all in one area. Drivers won't have as far to travel. And it'll be a smaller focus group of conversation, because my opinion is training is different for different areas. Different areas have different challenges, whether it's traffic or roads or pedestrian traffic, et cetera. So maybe those are things that can be handled in an area versus one large training of 300 drivers in a high school auditorium.
And I think putting in staff development will help us a lot.
Yeah, and we heard all of it, yes.
One thing that I didn't hear today that I know has been a conversation is the routing and the choice and magnet school issue. Is that something that is going to be reevaluated in this whole process?
So clarify what you're talking about.
Well, and I'm just going to give you personal experience. I have a child who has the opportunity to ride a magnet bus. There are not many children who ride this magnet bus, but I know the magnet bus comes by every single day to and from school. So if there's only 4 students riding the bus, why does the bus take the same route every single day, knowing that there's going to be 4 students for the rest of the year? Is there a way for us to reduce the route and have a parent? I'd be happy to sign off that my child is never going to ride that bus in the next 2 years. She's not going to get on the bus. So why is the bus still coming by my house twice a day or near my house if there's nobody on it? That's a waste of fuel, a waste of wear and tear on the bus, a waste of driver time, etc. So if we can move in that direction to reevaluate that system. I don't want to take services away from choice and magnet students. There are a lot of students who do use that service. But if the service is available and it's not being used, let's get rid of what's not being used.
So that whole efficiency issue is one that we're gonna look at.
I didn't
Because
hear
routing
that.
and planning, well, it's part of that whole management thing, but yes, we didn't specifically talk about it. The bus drivers gave us feedback on making sure that the routing and planning, that they had the time to do that first route so that they go through and they run their routes, and that helps them. And then when there's changes that need to be made, that those change, they gave us feedback on that, and making sure that the training is done. I think our staffing and routing and planning, we're planning on making sure that we go through additional training, and that's one of the issues that came up related to the technology, so that we can use the highest level of the edgelog that we can get. And so that's all part of it, but being more efficient with where we're stopping, and that brings up another issue that, we have kids now that are being picked up if there is space on a bus, if they're within the 2-mile limit, and that can create stresses for the buses, and the drivers. And so that is another thing we're looking at. So I think there is an efficiency. You remember when we did this before, we saved funding, we saved money, because when you stop, every time you stop and start, using more gas, and it is more complicated for the drivers. So those issues related to the 2-mile, we'll be coming back to you with recommendations on that.
And again, I don't want to take away services that students are getting, but if someone's being offered service and it's not being used and it's still being provided, we need to rethink that. One of the other things that I didn't hear, and I know it was in the focus group information, was tools and parts, and mechanics having issues with tools and parts, and are we reevaluating how we're looking at that?
Yes, and
So it's
a couple of things on that, so what we provide for the mechanics is part of the negotiations, and so we're looking at that, and we're looking locally what's done, so we know how we can compare with that. But the others, also the parts on the mobile repair units, that was also something that came up, but additional mobile repair units, when I talked about that to the drivers and to the employees from transportation, they wanted to make sure that that the inventory on the mobile repair units was kept up, so that as they got out there, they didn't have something that wasn't there that would have been able to have them get help. So
specifically under repair quality, they note availability of parts are cited as a factor in the quality of the repair, and that budget cuts have impacted the parts inventory, and so mechanics are often asked to make do with the parts that are not optimal for the job. So that's a big concern heard yesterday from a driver who got a ride to do a DOE inspection. DOE inspection didn't get finished, the driver sat there all day long, then had to be taken home and brought back to the inspection location and sat there again and still doesn't have a bus. So that's.
So the whole process for grease days
Yes.
is on the table.
Free state is definitely an issue.
But that's an opportunity for training as well.
It is. If you're sitting there for Grease Day, I agree. Incentives definitely was on my list of things to look at. And I question too, if we ever considered, and I don't know who and how our Grease Days and our inspections, but that's a DOE. If we ever considered a third-party inspection, I know that those take a lot of time for our own mechanics. And I don't know if that's something other counties do, or they still have their own mechanics do the Grease Day inspection.
The problem is they do it because when you find something during the inspection, you want them to fix it. If it goes to a third party, that's one more step and less time that the bus is with the driver, or more time it's away from the driver, I should say. So that would be my concern with having a third party do it, is if a third party goes through and inspects it, if there's something wrong, then we have to come back and fix it at the shop again.
Well, maybe that third party can hang out at,
Like specific days, just take a look at it and see if anybody does it
We'll look at
differently.
it.
We will.
You know, just see if
The only other thing that I've heard from drivers is the day that they actually have to do their Grease Days. And I know Monday early releases are truly an issue, and then trying to get out early for pickup. So maybe we can remove the Mondays from Grease Days, as that's already, their days are cut short. And then I know that, Chris, I was gonna pass you a note. One of the things that I've heard recently this week is, we do bus inspections, end of year bus inspections, and I guess they're starting Monday, but drivers are just now getting told that those inspections are gonna start happening, so they don't have a lot of time to be prepared for that. And I know we don't pay them the amount of time that they actually have to use to clean their bus. So, again, when we talk about communication, I don't want it to just be radios, or I want it to be interpersonal communication as well. Those skills coming through professional development, so that the issue in West Chase, that was a communication issue, a huge communication issue where one person didn't tell another person this person's going to be gone.
So one of the things we asked was, how is the best way for us to communicate with you? Because of the just very function of transportation, it's dispersed. And so we have to figure out the best way and then make sure we use all those ways. But some the parent link is a great communication tool. Others don't like it. And some want to use technology to make sure that because they can get to a computer quickly, or they have everything tied to their phones or whatever. That's fine, but some don't. So our idea was to see which is their preference, and then make sure we cover all of those.
Good, thanks, appreciate that, that's a good insight. That's awesome.
Thank you. First of all, I would like to thank the BPI team. I have to tell you, I got tired just reading this report. To have all those meetings and at 5 a.m. and all the hours, so thank y'all very, very much. Between that and the consultant's report, we have a very complete picture of the situation. It's not a pretty picture. Really not a pretty picture. I have some specific comments, but I think it's really important to focus and prioritize. Certainly bus purchases is an issue, but really and truly for me, until we have enough mechanics and enough drivers, it doesn't matter how many buses we have. If they're sitting there, there is no point. So I hope we will get very creative. I thought as I read this is a it's a very detailed presentation. I didn't see a lot of creativity. And I think we have got to get very inventive when it comes to trying to figure out how to hire enough people. Clearly, what we've been doing is not fill our slots. I'm sure salary is part of that, but I suspect working conditions and working hours are also part of it. So I hope that will be a major focus. If we talk about a mechanical in the radio room, I don't know that we need it practicing that. Maybe we need someone with some knowledge. Again, let's not take a mechanic Please let's be more sensitive when we promote a driver into another position. Let's be real careful about the timing of how we move that person. If you move a principal, there are other people who can fill in. If you move a driver, you're just taking a bus off the road. I know there will be some issues with the contract. I know seniority drives have to do a lot of things, and I don't know if we really look at that, and maybe that's a phase two. I think we need to think about it. I agree with Ms. Stewart about communication. One of the comments that struck me, and I heard more than once, K6 says call your area office says call K6. Okay, that's not something that's helpful to the driver, so somebody has to figure that one out. And I think, as Ms. Stewart said, this is not just about the radios. This is also about how people work together. We may need very special customer service training for the people in communications, for example. In terms of training, again, I think we think about training as everybody in a room being taught that. We don't let our teachers do that anymore. So I'm really glad that we're moving this into staff development, and I would again ask, if we think about putting some reading modules online, drivers can call them up on their cell phones. Sometimes you get trained and there are 6 steps. Well, if you forget that you have to do step 5 before step 6, the thing doesn't work. If it's something you do every 6 months, you're not likely to remember it. So let's ask staff development to think about whether there are some mini modules that before you do a particular thing, you can just click on and see what's important. I think it's also really important, I saw it in the focus report too, so this comment about, we route for 102 students and 6 of them on the bus. Let's get parents to make a commitment and say either my child will ride the bus, or if you don't return the form, your child will not get on the bus until you return the form. And we might have to move routes, but we are not being efficient or effective when we're running buses for people who aren't riding them. I think we need a strategy for what kinds of buses we repair. If you go through the focus group, you give some very specific things about these buses don't work, they're too expensive to repair. I'd also suggest we think about whether we ought to cannibalize some buses. That may not be a good idea, because it may be that it's the same part on every bus that wears it. I'd like to think about. Any more recommendations that come, I hope will come first from us at a workshop so we can really think this through. I like the idea of flexible scheduling in the 3rd shift for mechanics. And I was glad to hear about facilities for drivers' comfort. I think there's someone saying, well, I didn't have any money to put in the machines. You might want to remind drivers there are machines, but they require money. I don't understand why a driver, when we have a shortage of drivers in